Hello again. This is Satan's Trilogy, Book 1, Chapter 6, Reading 50. I am the author and the narrator. Hope you enjoy yourself. Sit back and relax. Esther smiled. You know, pizza begins like an artist's painting. A blank canvas, and then the pigments are added. Esther smiled as she caught everyone's attention. Preparing the crust is critical to a great pizza, as it is to the artist and his canvas. Day and I took a great canvas and applied a great sauce. Some wonderful colors, toppings actually. Esther laughed at herself. I love making pizza, laughed Esther. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Esther jumped up. That must be Aunt Brandy's boyfriend. Checking the door's peephole and then opening the door, Esther smiled and welcomed back Aunt Brandy's date. Dr. Song, please come in. Esther opened the door wide and allowed Brandy's date to enter the room. Please join us. Aunt Brandy is still asleep, but we would love to have your company. Esther took his coat and placed it folded onto the entry table. Jacob smiled at Esther. You know, Esther, you must be nearly perfect. You know just the right thing all of the time. I'd love to join you for a short while. It's a really long day. Smiling at Esther, Jacob noticed that the party had grown. Esther, you have guests. I don't want to intrude. The doctor started to hesitate entering the living area. Well, Dr. Song, this is a best friend of ours, Raven, and this is her sister, Riley Grace. I think they heard we were having some cold pizza and decided to stop in unannounced. And so far, we've had a fantastic time. Take a seat and join us. Aunt Brandy is still asleep. I'm afraid that beer is her weakness. Esther looked at Raven and Riley Grace and smiled. Dr. Song is a long-time friend of Aunt Brandy's. Dr. Song grabbed a chair from the side wall and joined the festivities at the table. So what have you girls been talking about? Don't tell me. Seeming confident, he said, boys. Jacob was certain of his guess. The girls looked at each other, laughed, and then all agreed with him. Raven said, well, Dr. Song, when you're 18, boys are always looking for girls. Raven continued, we understand that boys our age have one thing on their mind, but we go to Grant High, and our opportunities are huge now. Everyone at Grant High has an opportunity to succeed in anything they want. We all have scholarships if we want them. I am putting men on the back burner. I hope to attend medical school one day. My goal is to become a psychiatrist. Riley Grace was enjoying her cold pizza and just listening. Her eyes darted back and forth between everyone. Esther had poured Riley some milk earlier, and Riley stopped eating the pizza long enough to take a long drink. Riley spoke up after finishing her milk. Boys my age are silly. I really can't identify with them. I guess it's my higher level of intelligence. Esther, Raven, and Day all looked at Riley Grace and laughed. Raven said, I love you, Riley, and you're right. 13-year-old boys are silly, and your intelligence does place a huge divide between you and the boys your age. Esther looked at the doctor. He made a good guess, but we weren't on that subject until now, said Esther. How did your evening go at the hospital? Asked Esther. Dr. Song sat up with some pride and said, I saved a man's life tonight. He needed a double bypass. It's wonderful what we can do today to save a life. Esther said, "That's fantastic. It must feel very rewarding to know someone is alive because of your efforts." Everyone heard a chirping sound. "Sorry, that's the ring for my dad." Raven jumped up and left the table. Raven went into the hallway to speak with her father and soon returned, looking at Riley with a satisfied face. Raven said, "Dad's working late. He said to enjoy ourselves." Esther glanced at Day and caught an expression of approval, then suggested, "Well then, text your dad that you are staying the night with Esther and Day. I have planned a fantastic breakfast, and I guarantee that you'll love both. You'll both love it. Besides, the night isn't over yet." Esther smiled and looked at Raven in a confident manner. "Riley Grace, would you like to spend the night?" asked Raven. Riley's eyes became very large. "Oh, are you kidding? I would love to spend the night." Riley Grace looked at Esther with a look that could only be expressed as love, and she asked, "Where will I sleep?" Esther looked about the table and found A's eyes of approval, then responded, "I think you should sleep with Raven in my 300-year-old bed. I think that you will love it." Esther looked at Riley Grace and presented a mildly serious face. "You may dream of great battles while sleeping in my bed, but don't be concerned. The dreams will make you stronger." Esther smiled at Raven. Studying the little girl, she knew that Riley Grace understood. She would gain strength from the evening sleep. Very intelligent and alert to everything about her, Riley Grace understood that some things could not be explained. Dr. Song was checking his watch. "I must be going. This has been great, but I get up early tomorrow and have a long day scheduled." Pausing for a moment, he added, "Esther, I have always known that your aunt was special, and now I find that there are 4 more special girls in her life. I hope that we'll see each other real soon. Please tell your aunt that I had a wonderful time." Stopping at the front door, he smiled at Esther. "There's something wonderful going on here, and I hope to be a part of it." Dr. Song gave Esther a hug, kissed her on the cheek. "If you ever need me, and I mean for anything, call me." Dr. Song walked out of the door. Esther looked back at the dining table and, looking at the girls, said, "There's a carnival at the lakefront. Who thinks we should go?" Immediately, all 3 girls raised their arms. Each thought the lakefront would be great fun. "Let's hit the road, then," Esther said with some enthusiasm. They all grabbed something, either a coat, sweater, or some shoes, then stood at the door. Esther was excited. "We'll take the Mustang. Our first ride together." Esther opened the door and invited everyone to enter the hallway. Reaching the car, Esther boasted with pride, "My cousins have given my car a new cherry red metallic paint that is so awesome. I must go tomorrow and thank them." Esther started the engine and revved it to see how the RPMs measured on the dash. "Well, this little buggy is sweet." Esther put the car into gear and took off. In less than 30 minutes, the girls were at the lakefront. The carnival was less than 6 blocks away from where they parked. Riley was very excited. "I've never been at a carnival before. It's so bright. Are we going to ride on some rides?" asked Riley Grace. She was looking at Esther. "Riley, we're going to go on every ride here, and we should probably have something sweet. After all, we didn't have a dessert tonight, did we?" Esther smiled, and as they walked through the entrance, Esther spotted the ticket stand. "Hold on," said Esther as she walked over to the ticket booth. She soon arrived back with 4 long streams of tickets. I asked how many rides they had and then bought 4 times that number. Esther handed each girl a streamer of tickets. Day and Raven looked at each other and then decided, without saying a word between them, what the hell? This would be a night of stomach-aching carnival rides. Each girl was committed to dare the experience. The first ride was one of the country's largest merry-go-rounds. Tame, but a fun experience nonetheless. Riley was running to the next ride as quickly as she could. They reached the double Ferris wheel. Within a half-dozen minutes, they climbed to the double-seat ride. Riley, Grace, and Raven went on the first seat, and then Day and Esther went on the second seat. Day turned to Esther. Sorry, Esther, but I really don't like heights. Day was looking a little peaked. Esther laughed and then became more serious. Day, you didn't have to go on this ride. Day, looking a bit queasy, said, I didn't want to miss out on what everyone was experiencing. Esther laughed. That is very wise of you, but in this case you might have bowed out. Esther grabbed Day with her arm around her and said, The ride will end soon. Looking at Day and realizing that her eyes were closed, Esther suggested, Day, I think you'll do better with your eyes open. I really do. Day opened her eyes. Her hands were grabbing the front bar on the Ferris wheel, and she wasn't about to let go. Esther held Day. It's better if you see your surroundings, said Esther. As Esther held Day, she noticed a small skirmish behind one of the tents. A single person was surrounded by 7 or 8 males. The males started to attack the individual. Esther sensed that perhaps this person needed some help. It was time to get off, and Day jumped off the seat like there was no tomorrow. Esther said to Day, Please stay with Raven and Riley, then follow me, but stand back at the crowd. Please do not come forward. Esther smiled. I'll be over there, behind the tent. Esther quickly took off. Behind the tent and sandwiched between the other tents, Esther found a small skirmish going on. A young Chinese man, most likely Esther's age, was surrounded by 6 men. Esther watched as they took turns attacking the young man, only to be fended off by his martial arts fighting skills. The 6 men surrounded him and soon were able to grab him. The largest of the 6 started to slap the young man, yelling at him while punishing him at the same time. Finally, Esther had seen enough. She stepped forward, moving quickly into the center of the attack, and grabbed the hand of the person that was slapping the boy's face. Speaking softly, Esther said, I think that you have inflicted enough pain on this person. Esther was looking the young man straight in the eyes. Who in the hell are you, and who do you think you are? Asked the young man, wearing faded and torn blue jeans with an equally faded t-shirt that came from a ZZ Top concert. He seemed a little puzzled at the sight of an attractive young blonde that was able to hold his arm back. Not releasing his arm and keeping a smile on her face, Esther explained, I was on the Ferris wheel when I saw the 6 of you chase this young man behind this tent. I wondered if you were trying to capture a criminal. But from the looks of it, the 6 of you are becoming the criminals. It's against the law to beat on a person the way you were doing it. Did this man break the law? Esther asked while still smiling. The questions and comments helped to relax the man's arm, and he dropped his attack on the young Chinese man. Looking at Esther, he pulled his long hair back and then started to explain. Look at him. He's Chinese. I can't stand Chinese. My dad lost his job because the company moved to China. Now the Chinese want to come here and take more jobs from us on our own soil. It's not going to happen. Esther had seen racial discrimination before many times. Do you know this person? He looked at Esther. No. Let's talk with him and find out if he is indeed Chinese, said Esther. Turning to the young Chinese male that was still being held by two of the assailants, Esther looked at him and asked, "Are you Chinese?" Having been roughed up a bit, he was still able to speak. "I am a third-generation American. My great-grandfather came here from China over 100 years ago. I am not Chinese, I am American. I was born here in Chicago, as was my dad." There you have it. Esther smiled at the aggressive male that was determined to destroy a Chinese invader. "This person is a citizen, third generation." Then Esther decided to add a comment. "You know, only the Indians that we took this land from are the true Americans. They arrived 12,000 years ago. The land was truly theirs, and we took it from them." The young white male suddenly lost interest in harming the Chinese American and said, "Shit. This whole world is messed up." Looking at the male that he had intended on sending to the hospital, he said, "Sorry, man. I'm angry and released that anger on the wrong person. I am really sorry." He walked away. Esther watched him leave as his friends followed him. Esther turned to the young man. "My name is Esther Saint." Smiling, Esther offered her hand out to greet him. I could have taken him, but there were 6 of them attacking me. Esther smiled at him and kept her hand extended. "The thing you must remember is that when attacked by more than one assailant, they usually attack one at a time. So you are, in reality, fighting only one assailant at any one time." The young man thought to himself for a moment and then realized the wisdom in Esther's words. "Thank you, Esther Saint, for your help and offering me your wisdom." He took Esther's hand and greeted her as a friend. "I have heard your name. The Chinese community speaks highly of you. I apologize for my behavior." Bowing to Esther, the young man said, "I must leave. I am very late. I must return home. My name is Ho, and I owe you a great debt." Ho quickly left, and Day, Raven, Riley Grace quickly walked up. Esther immediately asked, "Does anyone want cotton candy?" Immediately the subject was changed from the confrontation to cotton candy, and Riley Grace was excited. "Oh my," Riley Grace gasped. "I love cotton candy, and I haven't had it for a very long time," stated with a pleading expression. "Let's find some," Esther said. "I had it once a very long time ago, and I would love to experience it again." The girls quickly walked back out onto the main aisle and followed the path until they found a concession stand that sold cotton candy. It was exciting and adventurous to be out late, yet feeling safe with Esther. The sounds of the carnival were bizarre, with crazy sounds in the background. Esther handed Riley Grace a full cloud of cotton candy and said, "Riley Grace, this is yours." She then took another cloud of cotton candy and suggested, "Dan Raven, why don't we share this one? I can only allow myself a small amount of this wonderful dessert." Raven and Day both agreed. Esther took a small pinch of the cloud and placed it into her mouth. "Oh my, that is so wonderful. It is different from anything that I have ever had." Esther handed the cotton candy funnel to Day. Raven and Day both took a pinch of the cotton candy and started to walk the rest of the carnival grounds with Riley Grace and Esther, while feasting on the cotton candy. The girls rode every ride, big and small. After nearly 2 hours, the girls were still excited, enjoying the damp evening air with the sounds of the carnival echoing about them, and yet they had reached the end of the carnival. Esther turned to the others. "Maybe we should do this again sometime." Riley Grace perked up just a bit and said, "That would be wonderful." Everyone could see the excitement in her eyes as the thought of another day at the carnival with her sister, Raven, and her new best friends. Esther spoke up again. "I suggest the next time we come, we plan on having supper here. The food tents all smelled great, and I saw someone eating a large pork chop sandwich that looked fantastic. Esther smiled. Then we all agree. This evening will be repeated. We'll all four come back for some food and fun. Esther was thrilled. The evening had ended wonderfully. Riley Grace was between Esther and Raven, with an arm around each as they walked to the car. Day was on Esther's left side, holding her hand and smiling with the rest of the girls. Day said, "It's been a really great night, but I am ready to sleep. I usually don't need much, but when I need it, I must have it." Esther said, "We'll be home in no time at all." Then she pulled Day closer to her and hugged her. Arriving home, Esther parked her car close to the apartments, planning to move her Ninja to the back parking area later in the evening. Riley Grace had fallen asleep. The three girls looked at her as she slept on the back seat. Esther spoke up. "I guess it would be mean to awaken her." Turning to Raven, Esther suggested, "Raven, why don't you carry her into the apartment?" Esther stood back. Raven looked at Esther and then stared at Day. She had never held her sister, and this seemed like a special moment to her. Riley Grace was in a deep sleep, and her body was limp. Raven reached into the back seat, and while it was slightly awkward, she lifted Riley Grace out of the car and started for the apartment door. Her long, slender legs dangled as Raven moved to the apartment entrance. Esther softly closed the car door and grabbed Day around the waist as she too moved towards the front door, following Raven. Entering the apartment, Esther softly said to Raven, "Follow me, the bed is ready." Esther pulled a sheet back from her bed as Raven laid Riley Grace upon the bed. She removed Riley's boots. Turning to Esther, Raven asked, "Can she sleep in her clothes?" Esther lightly laughed at the thought and said to Raven, "Let's strip her down to her underwear. She will sleep better that way." Esther helped to pull her jeans off, and Raven removed her blouse. Riley Grace was out to the world. She was hugging a pillow and in deep sleep. Pulling her socks off, Esther was amused at the black nail polish that Riley Grace had placed upon her toenails. Esther looked at Raven and said, "Look, there might be a little bit of Gothic in your little sister." Esther smiled and kissed the toes on Riley's left foot, then placed her foot under the blanket. Raven watched Esther and was somewhat puzzled, if not stunned, at the nail polish. Esther stood and slowly moved away from the bed as she commented to Raven, "You know that Riley Grace trusts you with her life. I think that she admires you and who you are. After all, she was confident that you would come to me for help when she asked you to do so." Esther smiled and added, "Yes, your little sister trusts you, and I think wants to be a bit like you." Raven and Esther joined Day in the living room. Day was sitting on the couch, but in a very stretched out and exhausted way. Day seemed to become more alert when Esther and Raven entered the room, quickly asking, "How's Riley Grace?" "She's in a deep sleep and doing just fine. I doubt that the kidnapping has affected her in the slightest. She is a very special little girl, and she is very wise," Esther quickly responded. Turning to Raven, Esther made one more comment. "Your sister did well tonight, but I think what pulled her through this is the fact that she counted on you and you didn't fail her." Esther reached for Raven's black hair, hiding a bit of her face, and pulled it aside. She is a very special 13-year-old. In many ways, she is like us, and yet she is only 13 years old. Esther smiled at Raven. She then decided to add a soft comment. We are both lucky to have such wonderful sisters. Esther turned today and gave a slight smile. Nothing is more important than family. And that's the end of reading 50. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, be safe, take care.